guys, my name is Samir Shagir. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, and last week I talked a little bit about the history of Ayurveda. In this clip I'll talk about the body types and how they're defined within the system of Ayurveda. So what are the doshas and how is our body type determined, and why is it important for us to understand our body type? So the doshas are the elemental forces or elemental building blocks that make up our physical body and the elemental building blocks of all things in creation. So everybody's considered unique within the system of Ayurveda. We each have our own unique body type, meaning we have a certain combination of the doshas or elements that make up our individual blueprint or individual what's called prakriti. And our prakriti in Sanskrit means our body type or constitution. So there's three main body types in Ayurveda. There's vata, pitta and kapha. And in order for us to understand the body types and the doshas, we need to understand the elemental forces behind these doshas. And they're called the pancha mahabhutas in Sanskrit, or the five great elements. And they're earth, air, fire, water, and ether. So they're prevalent throughout nature in the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the kingdom of man and woman. So yes, your dog or cat have their individual constitution as well as the plants and animals and trees and everything in nature has their own constitution. So why is it important for us to understand our constitution? Because one of the reasons is because on a daily basis we're eating certain foods and plants and herbs and things like that, and these things have their own individual constitution as well. So it's important to understand our body type and decipher whether these foods are compatible with our own body type. And that's a whole nother subject in itself, the study of plants and how they interact. But to get a general idea, it's good to have a general idea of how these foods and things we're intaking in our body on a daily basis and how they interact with our physical constitution. So the doshas, there's vata, pitta and kapha. So vata is ruled by the air and ether elements, and the qualities of these elements are dry, light, subtle, mobile, and quick, and also cold. And this reflects in a vata constitution. So if we look at a vata body type, usually they're of a slender proportion, they're usually skinny, sometimes they can have trouble gaining weight, and despite how much food they eat or the type of activities they do, whether they're lifting weights and things like that, sometimes they can still have trouble gaining weight. They're of a drier nature, so their hands and skin and hair and things like that could be dry. They're also cold, so their hands and feet can be cold. They can tend to get colder easily, especially in colder weather. So they prefer warm, moist climates. They're usually very animated people, very buoyant and joyful, and they're kind of the people that are always like bouncing off the walls, and they're very, like I said, animated. And they're very intellectual people. They like to inform themselves about many different subjects. They're sociable. They can be sociable. They like to surround themselves with different people and interact with different people. And sometimes this can overtax their nervous system and cause things like anxiety and fear, and even things like insomnia are connected to vata when it's out of balance. So a good example of a vata body type would be Cameron Diaz, or Jim Carrey would be another great example of a vata type, and also Brian May, the lead guitarist of Queen, would be a good example. And they make great musicians. They're very creative people, so they're very musically inclined, and even physically their hands, their fingers are usually slender and skinny, and their hands are slender, so that enables them to play certain instruments. They have fluid movements with their fingers, very quick movements, and they're good at playing instruments, or they can be good at playing instruments like the piano and the guitar and things like that. So pittas, how does the doshas manifest within a pitta body type? And so pittas are ruled by the fire and water elements. And fire and water is associated, especially fire is associated with intensity, very focused, driven people. So this reflects in their personality and their body type. Physically, they're usually very muscular people. They're very lean. They're usually of a medium height, versus vata could be either tall or short. They're very intense people, very focused, like I said, driven, self-directed people. They have a high intelligence, and sometimes this can they can make very good managers and directors because they're good at seeing the talents in certain people and delegating certain tasks. They have what's called a high sadak pitta, which is the mental fire, the mental intelligence. And they're able to assimilate and digest and capacitate a lot of information at once, and also retain the information. So some common examples of when pitta becomes imbalanced, sometimes it can manifest as burning sensations in the body, acid reflux, ulcerative colitis, things like this can manifest when pitta becomes out of balance. Also, they could be sometimes very critical of themselves and others, and this can manifest as a bad temper or an explosive temper. So some common examples of a pitta body type would be like Bruce Lee would be a good example. Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, they all make or are of a pitta constitution or pitta nature. Another example would be Julianne Moore. She would be an excellent example of a pitta. She's not completely pitta, but primarily pitta. And she has, like, her reddish hair and very sensitive skin, sensitive eyes. And a lot of pitta body types or body constitutions, they usually have sensitive eyes and skin. So kapha, how do the elements reflect in a kapha body type? So kapha is ruled by the earth and water elements, and the characteristics of these elements are dense and heavy and stationary, things like that. So this reflects in a kapha body type. And kaphas can be very heavy, like more on the heavy side, but dense, mostly dense. And a lot of times people attribute being overweight to the kapha dosha, but that's not the case. Kapha body types can be curvy, and like an example of a kapha would be Beyonce. She would be a good example of a kapha type. She has kind of a curvy Venusian type body relating to Venus. So Venus, I'll talk about the planets and how they affect our body or body type in later lectures. But another example would be like Marilyn Monroe. She would be an example of a kapha body type. So kaphas are usually very open and loving people. They're very open-armed people, very nurturing, and they can make also good parents because of their nurturing nature. When kapha goes out of balance, they have a tendency to become overweight and to become obese. Also, they have a tendency to be lazy, and it can also manifest as things like stagnancy and even depression. So these are some of the imbalances of kapha. And the imbalances of each dosha or each body type can be offset by certain practices. So in Ayurveda, there's a certain regimen for the different body types. There's certain yogic practices that can make us what's called more sattvic, or more luminous, more balanced in nature. And also certain dietary protocol or a certain lifestyle that we should follow that can help us become more balanced. So a lot of times I get asked, does my body type change over time, or does it stay the same? And the answer is that it stays the same, because when we're born with a certain number of characteristics or a certain proportion of elements, and this is what's called our prakriti, and the prakriti usually never changes. For 99.999% of us, it never changes. For the small percentage of people that it does change, it's because through certain yogic practices and through certain, mostly yogic practices, we can change or alter our constitution. And I'm talking about dedicating your life to certain practices and practicing them for hours each day. We can alter the constitution of our body. But for the most part, like I said, 99.999% of us, it never changes. And what does change is the proportion of the doshas in relation to our original prakriti or constitution. And when the doshas, because see, the textbook definition or the Sanskrit meaning of dosha is that which vitiates or that which is corruptible. And the doshas are always in a state of flux and reflux, or creation, preservation, and destruction. And this relates to how the doshas, so when the doshas deviate from your original constitution, it's said that you're imbalanced and that disease is more likely to manifest. The closer the doshas are to your original prakriti or constitution, the more imbalanced you are and the more in harmony you are with your original nature. So a lot of people think maybe that, they're either Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, but the truth is that we have all three doshas prevalent within our makeup. And you may think that you're a Vata or Pitta or Kapha primarily, but a lot of times two doshas are predominant and they're evident within our constitution. So you could be like a Pitta Kapha or a Pitta Vata, or like a good example of a Pitta Kapha would be Mike Tyson. He has the versatility and the quickness of Pitta, coupled with the heaviness and density of Kapha, which makes for a good good combination for a heavyweight champion boxer. And a lot of boxers have this type of constitution. Another example would be Muhammad Ali. He has a similar constitution, or he had a similar constitution. So I hope this was informative to you. I'll also be doing a series on Ayurvedic cooking, so please stay tuned. And if you're interested in a consultation, please check out the link below. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them down in the comment section below. And I hope to see you next week. So thanks so much.